We have several programs for the year that are quite exciting. Please keep an eye out for the newsletter and visit the website at CSINext.org. Being a virtual chapter, we're strong supporters of social media in any form. At Construct, CSI did a soft launch of the new website, www.csiresources.org. I encourage all CSI members to check it out. This is an exciting direction that CSI is taking, and as a benefit to the membership, I think you'll be quite pleased with it. You're not a member of CSINext? We'd like to have you join us. Besides the occasional meeting notification, you'll receive the monthly e-blast with program information, access to your own blog at CSINext, chapter events, and more. With that, let us begin our presentation, Drones in Construction, presented by Victor Brewer. If you have any questions, please type them in and we'll answer them along the way, trying to make this as interactive as we can. At the end of the presentation, there will be a survey, and if you'd like to receive learning units, please fill out the survey. If you need AIA credits, please include your AIA number in the comment spots of the survey. With that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Victor Brewer.
Thanks, Daniel. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you inviting me to talk to you online. One thing I didn't realize before Daniel and I talked yesterday was I wouldn't have the easiest time interacting with you, but I'm glad to see that I can potentially answer questions through text, and obviously speaking back to you as you text me. So I'll give a brief overview of who I am. Obviously, my name is Victor Brewer. I'm 30 years old. I work and run with my business partner 2 drone companies. One is called Aerial Image Solutions. The other is called Infinite Impact. Infinite Impact is more of a media-driven company, whereas Aerial Image Solutions is more of a data-driven company. Both of them involve aerials and ground photography / videography and advanced media. But we try to differentiate the engineering and construction from the marketing. I've been doing this for about 4 years. So before DJI was a big thing, before easy access drones were available, we built our own drones quite frequently. That's all we did, is we built our own drones and operated them and used off-the-shelf cameras to put underneath on gimbals and fly them around and take good construction photos. The reason I got into this is because my father is a construction litigation specialist pertaining to schedules, and he always told me that he was very interested in seeing better aerial photography on job sites for keeping track of actual progress. So I got into this about 4 years ago. My actual college degree, I have an associate in science and an unfinished bachelor's in language. I studied language and I really enjoyed it, but as I got into drones, I realized that was going to be my business, and for lack of a better term, and forgive the pun, it took off. So we started doing this, and the interesting thing is, in the beginning, there really weren't any regulations to speak of. The FAA had essentially given up any sort of desire to regulate via several court cases regarding RC aircraft in the late 80s, early 90s, and but lo and behold, as cameras began to go onto these quote-unquote drones and people began to use them for commercial purposes, they took a new interest and began to try to formulate ways to regain control over the industry. Since then, we kind of entered the phase of attempted action by the FAA, which was after 2012. People were fines were attempted against people and businesses, and the FAA lost those attempts to fine people, so they had to find a new way to gain control, and that's when they introduced what was called the 333 exemption. After they introduced the 333 exemption, which technically was not law, it was just a exemption provided by the FAA, but it began to have the weight of law because people began to look for that within drone service providers. We worked with the FAA and got our 333 and began to work under that. But again, it again has since changed just in this past month of August, and now we have what's called the Part 107, which is actual law. So we now have a certified pilot for Part 107. You can now become a drone pilot. You can get that certification, as you see, for anything less than 55 pounds. The exam is actually quite a bit harder than most people expect. And so now you have the emergence of truly lawful drone companies at this point, because drone companies now have to abide by these regulations that have been produced. So Mark Ogg was the one who invited me to speak at this. He had heard me speak at AACE. It was a local chapter down in Cincinnati, and I really enjoyed presenting to them, and I'm sure Mark can attest. I don't know if you guys are in the same room or all in different rooms, but Mark will be able to attest afterwards that I like to have questions, so please feel free to type and chat as we go along, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that do come up. Um, Drones in construction. I think construction drones are probably the most powerful tool that's been invented since power tools. I mean, it's just incredible the things that can be done with drones on job sites. Obviously, you've got very basic things that you can do, such as general photography and just tracking the project and taking a look at what's going on. People can see that progress is being made, the job is on schedule, or they can see it's behind, or regulations are being broken, or OSHA is being violated, etc. They can really see an overall picture at this point of what is going on their job sites. And so, aside from basic photography, there's a couple other things that are really, really applicable to drones in general. One of the things that I really love is what's called photogrammetry. I see it on some job sites, more so on quarries right now, but photogrammetry, for lack of a better term, is, to put it simply, are hundreds of photos stitched together to create one large detailed image that is interactable. So you can take a look at it, zoom in, check altitudes, or above sea level altitudes, and check your grade. You can really do a lot of amazing things with this. And the drone gathers essentially all this information. The only excess information that's being provided aside from the drone are through what are called, you see here, ground control points. And those ground control points help us to get correct altitudes for the contour lines. So as you see, same map, we can go back to it, and now we can see it just as a no contour map. And really the amazing thing about this is, before this, to get something like this would cost $25,000 to $50,000, and this on a site this size. Whereas now this same sort of map can be purchased for right around $1,500 from any of your local drone providers that know how to do it. I say $1,500. I would say that's probably the average price, but it's very interesting to see how useful this tool can be within construction for monitoring an entire job site, as opposed to just portions like you can see with photography. So let me see if I can pull up another site similar to this, another construction site. But this is a bad example of a construction site that you can tell there's something wrong with it.
While you just brought that up, a question came up, I think, is in regards to the contours. How long does it take for the data to be retrieved from the drone to make it presentable to the client for review?
That honestly depends on who is providing you the data. It can be as short as 2 hours. honestly. It could be as long as a week, it could be as short as 2 hours. It really just depends on how they're processing it, and we'll talk about that here shortly, how they're processing the data and whether it's through a third party or whether it's the construction company itself processing the data. Because now, obviously, there's the possibility for construction companies to go out and hire a drone pilot um, for internal use and have them go out to the job sites. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that, not just because I'm a drone provider, but because there are a lot of additional insurances that are required. Obviously, you want to find, if you do hire a pilot, you want to find an industry expert, somebody that's a very good quality pilot, because just as the construction industry is a litigious industry, so is the drone industry. And construction companies and all sorts of companies, engineering firms, architectural firms, all these different firms are going to find out very shortly, I'm sure, that purchasing or providing drone imaging can really lead to lawsuits, whether it be someone crashing the drone and then somebody questioning who's at fault with that. Was it just the service provider, or are they going to come after the person that contracted that service provider to go to the area? Was that person legally allowed to fly? There's so many different questions. So here's a job site. Obviously, this job site looks pretty rough. But I really like this example to see for a stakeholder. Let's say this was presented monthly, because we were shooting this monthly. I can't imagine that they would be happy at the disorganization on this site. I mean, it's just terrible looking. But yeah, to process a site this size for photogrammetry would probably take half hour on site to gather the data, and then probably max 2 hours to process it in computer.
Another question came up. Who is liable for any potential damages or intellectual property rights if you photograph private property?
So at this point, that is actually all state regulated. The FAA has classified drones in the same category as aircraft at this point. And so anyone can take a photo from the air and use it for whatever they want. I mean, that's just how airplanes have always been. You can photograph. I mean, Google obviously photographs private property all day, every day from space, and has that data publicly available to anyone and everyone. So that's really the regulations we're flying under now. However, there are certain states now that are enacting laws that basically state you cannot intentionally surveil people or private property. So, for example, if I am, in Miami and I'm trying to see if someone is, if I'm working for a private detective, I have to have a warrant to actually work for that private detective and surveil that person with a drone. I can't surveil that person legally in the state of Florida with a drone because of that specific law that they've created. Again, it's really interesting. There's no federal law against it. They can't stop you, but there are state laws against it at this point.
Thanks.
And so who would be liable? That's a good question too. I would say the drone operator would definitely be the liable party. However, I'm sure persons can be implicated if they hired that person without doing their due diligence.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah, that's I'm glad Daniel, you can pass on questions. This is awesome. So as you see, site condition is a really big part of construction aerial photography, and seeing if the progress is really on track with the baseline schedule. Another interesting thing I would like to bring up is mixing drone and aerial. So this is a project that we've been working on, and we have our drone in full scale, excuse me. We have an agreement with this airport to be able to go out and do drone photography. So you can see in the background, this is actually a very large airport near Columbus, and we have an agreement with them to be able to go out and do the site progression. So another nice thing about this Part 107 and about working with the FAA in general and hiring a company to do this is you can really interact with the FAA now and interact legally with airports and basically get permission to go very close. I mean, we were within a half mile of this airport, and this is a very large paramilitary airport, but we radioed into the tower using, ground radios and have permission to fly, this site and be able to obviously gather the data that they need that would otherwise, there you can see the airport in the background there, be completely illegal by anyone who isn't communicating with the tower and who doesn't have their FAA permissions and who hasn't submitted their what do you call it, their NOTAMs, notice to airmen's. So 48 hours ahead of time you're required to submit a notice to airmen, which is basically a form you can file online or call in, and tells the airman on this date at this time I'm going to be flying this site with a drone. And so that's a really nice thing to be able to do, is to interact with airports and be able to do that on a legal basis now, because before it just we couldn't have flown this site. It was just too close to an airport. But now we can work with these large companies that are installing these warehouses and really provide them with a great product and still be completely legal. So that's another interesting aspect is airports no longer make job sites off limits. They only make them harder to get to. That's pretty much it.
Your airport
Mm-hmm.
slide question came up. I was actually thinking the same
Yeah,
thing. So are you subject to airspace restrictions like any other aircraft at this point?
absolutely. Yes, we are. So essentially, but this is the nice thing is any aircraft can file for permission to fly in any airspace. So, for example, that's class D airspace, and class D airspace, you're required to previously you're required to get a new COA, but see you can set up what are called letters of agreement with different airports and different facilities, and then be able to call into the tower and request permission to fly within their airspace. So absolutely, we are now subject to all airspace regulations, but we also have permission to play in there if we, comply with their chain of command and I guess permission slip order. Another interesting thing is before, we were all limited to 400 feet under the 333, but now we are limited to 400 feet from the tip of the tallest building, as long as it complies with airspace regulations. So the nice thing is this really starts to open up the possibility of envelope inspections for construction. Before, envelope inspections were very, very muddy waters, because normally for something like that, people want to do it on a high rise, for example, to make it cost effective, or those are all always in downtown situations. So those were always very, very muddy. You had to contact the FAA well ahead of time, 30 to 60 days ahead of time, and work with them on getting permissions and work with the local police department and check for federal buildings. And not a lot has changed, but it's been more streamlined. We can now go above the building, which before, the altitude restriction was 400 feet, but now we can go to the height of the building plus 400 feet, which really, really allows us to interact with these larger buildings and get even cooler shots. I know that doesn't necessarily apply to construction, but for me, I love the possibility of doing good downtown shoots. At this point, it really has opened that up. The other thing too is obviously the before and after daylight and twilight, or twilight and civil dawn. You can now file for permissions to fly within those periods, or basically at night, a lot easier. So this really helps with the use of thermal on buildings to do roof inspections and that sort of thing. It really is going to open up that area. Again, Part 107 at this point is very, very, very important. I mean, this is UAV regulation. People will continue to operate, I'm sure, without their 107 or they're 333. There's still a lot of Joe Blows out there and cousin Franks who go out and buy a quadcopter and are piloting that for payment. But the nice thing to realize is any business worth its salt at this point is complying with these regulations. Obviously, so they'll stay in business longer than a year or two without getting busted. And I think that businesses at this point should be willing to pay for these pilots. That's where another big topic of discussion is the price of UAV services. They really have come down a lot in the past few years, and I think we're experiencing a soft deflation in the value, or the monetary value of UAV commodities. However, it's stabilized, which is nice. The price is definitely stabilized, and people are now willing to really pay quality companies for their services, quality UAV companies. Now you can find stuff quite a bit cheaper than a full-fledged company if you do go with like I said, cousin Frank with this quadcopter. I've seen guys out there advertising $35 photos, and these people just are out there doing this part-time, no insurance, after they get off their job, and no certification of any kind. And so I think that those prices will be there for a while longer, but I think that the prices are going to essentially rebound to standard photography, right in the $300 range, photogrammetry in the $1,000 to $2,000 range, and panoramas. I think we haven't really discussed panoramas much, but 360 panoramas right in the $595 to $895 range, I think. And that's what we've been seeing. Obviously running two of these companies requires us to be competitive, so we definitely keep a pulse on what the prices are out there. This is something really interesting that I've been working on for a long time. Panoramas are kind of one of my favorite things to work with. This is, I think, the world's first progression panorama on a job site. So this panoramas, 360 panoramas allow you to see in all directions. You can see north, south, east, west. I'm trying to go slow, so hopefully you guys have good connections and can see this well. Does this still look good?
It does. And another question that came in, how can the images and data from the drones be used in conjunction with design software such as 3D?
There are a lot of different ways to interact with 3D. For example, with these 360s, one of the things that we work with and we do on occasion is dropping virtual objects or virtual object placement within these areas. So, for example, if I do a panorama of this site, I can then take this into, for example, 3ds Max or a program like that and make this the environment and then place a structure within the panorama and then re-export, and then obviously you have a 3D building that's been placed, or a fake building that's been placed into a real environment. So within architecture, this is something that we like to do for architects a lot of times, is take sites or take panoramas of sites. In fact, I'll pull up another one that we did for planning. We'd like to do elevation studies with these. Let's see. So this one was done for use studying the elevate or the height of a tower. They wanted to see how far they could see at these specific elevations over here on the left-hand side. And so this is obviously the 200-foot, outer limit of what this was going to be. But we offered on this one of the things we wanted to do was make these panos the environment, and then make it interactable via a gaming engine. So you could set up a tower, a virtual tower, that you could walk on and interact with, either using a VR headset or just a keyboard and mouse and walk around on. And then you could go down the tower and see the different levels. So go down a staircase, see the next level, the next level. So these are things that we can really, these are all feasible, which is amazing. It's amazing that the day and age we live in, where we can basically create or take real environments and then um, put in virtual buildings and then interact in those buildings or walk around in those buildings looking out into a real environment. So that's something that's really huge, I think, for the architectural industry in showing off areas or spaces that will soon have a building, or for planning. Another one would be let's see if I can pull this one up. Oh, I had to pull up. Okay, so this was a interesting one done in Miami. Now this was done a long time ago, so please pay no attention to the altitude over there. This was done before any regulation was really in place, and we were exactly at 5 miles from the Miami International Airport, as you can see. The shelf, the shelf literally passed, or the airspace shelf passed right here, right right along this building. But yeah, this was a really interesting project because they're putting a 200-story condo facility here, and they want, or a high-end condo facility, and they wanted to do elevation studies and eventually put a condo and be able to interact and walk through the different floors and see what the altitudes would look like. So as you can see, it's pretty interesting. I like this one a lot. This one was going to be used more artistically, this evening shot. But the elevation studies, I think, are very applicable to construction and pre-planning. It's very important. Anyway, back to this area. So the really interesting thing about this project is we are doing panoramas from the exact same spot, right over this grate, every month to show the progress of this IKEA over here in Columbus, Ohio. And it really allows you to see the overall site development. And the nice thing is, too, one thing you'll notice, you can really zoom in. This isn't like Google Earth and you can't see detail. This really allows you to see some incredible detail and zoom in and see what's going on. Let's see the next month. And so this will go on for about, I think we have 9 more months. So we're pretty excited to put this out there. We're going to put this out there as I believe it's the world's first progression panorama, aerial panorama used within the construction industry, which is pretty exciting. But this is another, like I said, really powerful tool, because it's just to be able to see the site for what it is overall, and then you can even have construction workers now or project managers do 360s on the ground, which can then be linked in. So another really interesting interaction between the aerial is organizing ground photography. So say you have a project manager on this site, and he does, on the same day he goes out and he does 360s out in the parking lot area, or 360s on the interior. We can link these now into one comprehensive, almost private Google Earth tour. And it really allows you to explore the site and see what's going on at that day and age. And it really protects you post completion, because when people start to question, or if scheduling is off and you're impacting total float and money's being lost, there's inevitably mediation. There's almost inevitably mediation, and they always want photographic evidence of what was done, when, where. And to be able to link these now and have the ability to have project managers and superintendents take daily ground imaging that can then be, you know, organized by aerial imaging, or link it with an aerial imaging. It's pretty amazing. It just really is amazing the day we live in, and the the data collection tools that are available to us that are so often ignored, honestly. But that's a big one there. As far as further use in the construction industry, um, we really see people moving towards the use of thermal. Thermal's the big one, and we see some construction companies um, starting to do this themselves. Some of them are starting to have their own departments. Some of them are staying away from it. The interesting thing is, though, very few of the construction companies are keeping these departments around very long. What we're seeing is they start a department and they end up crashing a drone, and they don't want to take any further chances at being responsible for any sort of damage, so that they then sub out, which I think for the cost, really, it is worth subbing. Because obviously, drones, while they may seem simplistic on the surface, they still fly away sometimes for no good reason. And you really have to know how to mitigate that risk and make sure that that doesn't happen. It's very important. Any other questions, Daniel? Thus far? Did I lose you?
No, I always mute in between.
Oh yeah.
It looks like a couple have just come in. Can drones be used to perform visual inspections on such things as boilers or cooling towers to eliminate the need for human confined space entry, or those environments are
Absolutely.
they harsh for
I,
drones?
fe- I feel like that question. I feel like I'm getting punked right now because I built a drone specifically for that. Um, I built a drone for a company that does internal boiler inspections, and those environments, they are not too harsh, but the rate at which you will lose drones is quite a bit higher than you would in other environments, especially on the internal boilers. Smoke on the stacks, we'll look at the power plant. I didn't do this panorama for any sort of inspection purposes, but realistically, there would be no problem in flying up there and doing an inspection, especially at this point now where we can fly up to 400 feet above the nearest structure. That really allows us to get up here because this stack is 870 feet tall. So these environments here, specifically this environment, there's no problem. Drones can definitely be used for that. However, in talking to people, what I've seen is there's a mixed reaction with inspection, because so many people say that there's tactile um, inspection techniques that can never be replaced by drones. And that was interesting. It was a conversation that I had with a guy that inspects cell phone towers. And he was telling me that he could never use a drone specifically for tower inspection because there were many different tests they did that were just hands-on and that can't be substituted for. However, visual inspections on smokestacks, boilers, and chimneys, that sort of thing, absolutely. I believe that they will replace people because those situations are dangerous. I've been in boilers flying drones and I hated every second of it. I did not like it. So I can't wait for the day that people are going to be using drones more in that facility. Now, I think there will be several more advances. Number one, um, there have to be better low light cameras for the interior boilers because there's not enough lighting in there for good visual inspection. So when I built a drone for that, I built a drone with floodlights that would follow the camera because it was just so dark in there. We really needed to light up the wall to do any sort of inspection. And the other thing is, you want a sense and avoid. You want that drone to be able to get very close to the wall, but then halt and not go any further. Because as you're flying, as the pilot's flying in a boiler, I can tell you, it's very hard to maintain that distance or that perspective because you're looking up, you're craning your neck up so much. I think that's, and especially with bridges too. Bridges will be another big thing. This is an interesting one. This bridge was slated to be replaced and this engineering company wanted some photos just of the bridge in general. I was surprised they didn't want many up close photos, but I wanted to show you some of the up close ones I took. Just being able to get up next to it and see that sort of thing. We could get quite a bit closer, and the nice thing is now there are a lot of cameras that are coming out with a great deal of zoom for drones, so you'll be able to zoom in and really look and see, is there metal fatigue, is there stress, etc. There's a lot of things that you'll be able to do with that. You said there were more questions, Daniel? I'm sorry.
Um, no, it was just a side comment. So,
Okay, gotcha. Give me 1 second. All right. Um, I'm sorry, I'm sending out my address to someone quickly because they're swinging by a little later. So yeah, within bridge inspection too, I think that will be the next big leap within construction is bridge inspection, especially for bridge replacement and just monitoring of bridges in general. Um, that seems like that's an up and coming industry that was really hampered by drones not being able to have sense and avoid. But DJI recently put a patent on the sense and avoid technology that they came out with. It's a visual sense and avoid, so it's building a point cloud as it flies, and it literally is seeing in 3D space. It can see upcoming and pending objects, and it avoids them. It's absolutely amazing, and it will continue to get better with Google working on that, and Amazon and all these different companies. They really are pushing forward, trying to race through that. Um, and it is. It's a race right now. Obviously, delivery. People are talking about delivery a lot, but delivery, I don't believe, pertains much to construction. The only the only thing that I've seen in relation to construction and delivery are with wind turbines. I was approached by a company and asked to design a drone that would bring tools to workers on top of tall structures that they had to climb. So I think that there could be a potential for drone use there. Um, Apparently, for example, with wind turbines, the amount of money people spend, or the average supposedly is $1,000 every 10 minutes, and apparently it takes 5.5 minutes for someone to climb one of these towers. And apparently, very frequently, people forget to bring these tools up to the top of the tower, which I can't believe. But they want to be able to get these tools to them very quickly, aside from using a rope. So, pretty interesting. Other aspect of drones.
we did get a couple more questions.
Go for it.
In project specifications, and I'm sorry, I had an audio cutout, so if you already
That's all
kind
right.
of answered this. In project specifications, sometimes the required method of project documentation is specifically spelled out. With requirements for drones, have you had to work with architects and engineers in developing the requirements for drone usage on a specific project or job site?
See, that's a great question, and I have not seen anyone do that yet. I really think they should. I really think drone imaging companies should get involved with that when writing the contract or when the contract's written. People should be talking about this, and I think the people that are kind of at fault for this, and it's not really that big a deal, but are owners. Um, Owners aren't really thinking about this ahead of time, or at least the technology is not on their mind, and they're not thinking, oh yeah, let's get that drone company down the street involved so we can talk to them about the best way to image this project. The other part of that is that I see are construction companies so often don't follow the specifications set out for them in the contract. Just don't do it. They might be required to get biweekly per the contract, but they might only get monthly, or they might be required to get 40 photos at such and such an altitude, or they get 10. Because really, I mean, I think the aerial photography and the progression photography of job sites kind of falls into the category of the schedule. Yeah, schedules are very spelled out in contracts, how they're supposed to be kept. Yet very rarely are they kept to contract specification, and the same goes for aerial imaging. But here in the near future, we're working with a couple schedulers. One is a lady, uh, Cynthia, here in Columbus, Ohio. She works with Synchro, and we've worked with her a little bit, and I'd like to get more involved with what she's doing with Synchro and how we can tie that in, or tie aerial imaging into Synchro further. So that's kind of something we've been looking at. Go ahead. You said you had another question?
Yeah. So what would it take for an AE firm to try and start up their own RPV program?
It's not that bad, really. If that's the question, what I would say is first thing you need to do is you do not want to train a pilot in-house. You want to get someone who has experience flying RC, quite a bit of experience. Um, you also, beyond wanting someone that has experience flying RC, has an understanding of how these RC aircraft operate and what interferes with them. Um, because that's really what prevents crashes. Just caution and understanding how to keep these things from flying away. For example, and this is just a really quick example, I know it's a slight rabbit trail. Being close to this bridge, the iron in this bridge can interfere with my compass, my magnetic compass, and my GPS. And so that in turn can increase the likelihood that I'll have some sort of flyaway or you know strange action from the drone. Now, again, we're to the point in this industry where it's not that common, but you still read about it happening almost every day. So the number one thing is hire a good RC builder slash pilot, someone that has an innate knowledge of RC aircraft and has a very high skill level of flying these things. The second thing is make sure that that person gets their 107 underneath the company. Once they get their 107, um, you're pretty much golden. The only other thing that you really have to look out for is making sure that you communicate with the airports in general. I'd say that's the biggest thing, is making sure you communicate with the airports, you submit the correct paperwork before flights, and you also have aircraft insurance. That's the only other thing is having the correct insurance. But other than that, I think that that's really what prevents people from doing it. That answer, is that
Yeah,
pretty good?
I think so.
Okay, right?
I'll let the person who asked it do it, not
Yeah,
me.
yeah. There you go. Let's I know it's a little short, but I do have to get running. Actually, I didn't realize I'm running into another meeting. Would we be able to cut this a little short? I'd like to answer a
Oh
few
yeah,
more
oh
questions
yeah.
if people have them.
Yeah, we'll see if the
Yeah.
any last questions. Oh, one just popped in. All the
Okay.
pictures thus far have been taken on fair weather days. What's your experience with drone use in rain, snow, heavy winds?
That's a really good question. That is something that you're gonna want to do. You're gonna want to buy the right drone for. So there are drones out there that are specifically designed for um, stormy days or rain. I personally don't fly in rain. I don't fly in wind over 22 miles an hour. That's just a personal um, comfort level. Most aircraft are only rated to 22 miles an hour right now. I think it's a very bad idea to exceed that because, again, I'm all about risk mitigation. And, if you do exceed that and exceed the aircraft specifications and you have some sort of incident, people are going to come back on you, and very likely there will be some sort of loss. Say it crashed into a house, and instead of just facing a lawsuit with some homeowner wanting some roof damages repaired, the FAA would then get involved, and then you could be facing fines for improperly operating a drone,
Hmm.
and that's where you don't want to be. I would definitely want to stay away from that. So, any other questions?
Have
I
you
actually love
found
answering questions, man.
have you found that the incidence of equipment failure with your aircraft seems to decrease in inverse proportion to pilot experience?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. That is, I
I
would
could
just say
answer
yes.
that one.
That's a very good question, and absolutely that is the case. The saying in the industry is expect to lose three times your monetary investment annually. So if you invest $22,000, expect to lose three drones. So $66,000. That's the accepted failure rate of drones currently. I don't agree with that by any means. I will be honest, we've had three incidences in 4 years of operation,
Hmm,
and none of them ever happened to, it never impacted anybody, never had anybody get hit or anything like that. We had one drone. Um, the worst one was a catastrophic failure in Miami, actually. That Miami job that you saw, wherever it was, this one here. There is a drone about right here, somewhere out in the ocean. And we never were able to recover it. I sent out a diver, couldn't recover it. It was a complete power failure. The drone just dropped out of the air. So nothing we could have done about it. I mean, just absolutely dropped. So not sure why that happened. I'll always wonder, but I'll never know. Not until I get to heaven. So, all right. If there's
well,
not
no,
any other questions,
no,
I'm
no
gonna
other questions. And thank you, Victor. We really appreciate your insight on the emerging technology and everything that you
Yeah,
provided.
absolutely. I
And
enjoy it. I enjoy talking. Like I said, I'd be happy to come back and talk more. And Daniel, if possible, maybe look into it. I'd love to have people talk back to me next time. And I really appreciate your talking. Your communication was impeccable, so I appreciate it.
well, good, 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 good. And for everyone else, once again, if you'd like to receive your learning units, please fill out the survey when I close the webinar. And if you need that AI credit, please include your AI number. Thank you again, Victor, and thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
You too. Bye bye.